After crushing the three monarchs, Jinwoo came face to face with the real threat, Antares, the dragon monarch. No army, no warning, just pure destruction. The battlefield turned into hell. Shadow and flame collided, tearing the world apart. Jinwoo gave it everything, but even that wasn't enough, until something inside him snapped. Ashborn's true power awakened, and in that moment, Antares realized he wasn't facing a man anymore, he was facing the end. The next day, the monarch stood atop the ruins of a shattered building, scanning the empty landscape. Something was off. Too quiet, too still. He narrowed his eyes, wondering what game the so-called Lord of Shadows was playing. Perhaps it wasn't so surprising after all. Jinwoo had surely realized the hopelessness of his situation. Against an army of over 10 million, his 100,000 shadow soldiers would be nothing but a fleeting resistance. Suicide. The monarch smirked to himself, but suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Before he could react, missiles slammed into the ground around him, erupting in massive explosions, throwing up walls of fire and smoke. Fighter jets roared overhead, circling, unleashing everything they had. In their cockpits, the pilots gritted their teeth and prayed, "Target hit! Please, please tell me we got him." From above, through the thick columns of smoke, they couldn't see if Leonis Raumener, the monarch, had survived. They could only hope. But as the fires reached up toward the heavens, something stirred. Through the black smoke, two enormous glowing eyes opened. Cold, hungry. The pilots gasped. What? What is that? A massive, terrifying figure emerged, bored, almost playful. And in an instant, the monarch struck. The sky turned red with fire and screams as the jets were torn apart like toys. The monarch toyed with the birds, lazily plucking them from the sky. Meanwhile, far away on a deserted island, Jinwoo sat on a dark throne in the heart of his castle. His mind was heavy, restless. He lifted his gaze, and there above his throne, carved proudly into the stone, were the words, "My King." He chuckled quietly. Baran's handiwork, no doubt. Around him, the familiar presence of his shadow soldiers gathered. Baran appeared first on his right, followed by Antares on his left. Both knelt respectfully, their eyes filled with concern. "It's too dangerous, my king," Baran said gravely. Antares nodded. "You must not go." But Jinwoo only smiled at their loyalty. Danger? He knew that. And yet, this was why Osborne, the former Shadow Lord, had chosen him. He turned to Baran and asked, "If Osborne were standing where I am now, what would he do?" Without hesitation, Baran answered, "He would never retreat." The old general's voice trembled slightly with emotion, and in that moment, something clicked, a spark of recognition. As if seeing Osborne reflected through Jinwoo's determination, all the shadow commanders bowed deeply, speaking in unison. "We will follow you, my king, until the very end." Jinwoo rose from the throne, his armor gleaming under the cold light. He pulled out his phone, hesitating. Baran tilted his head curiously. "Will you call your family, my king?" Jinwoo smiled faintly, almost sadly. "I'm afraid if I hear their voices now, I won't be able to move forward." Without another word, he crushed the phone in his hand. There was no going back. Far from the island, chaos reigned. In a broken cityscape, the last fighter jet twisted through the skies, pursued by one remaining dragon. The pilot ejected, parachuting down into a devastated street. Heart pounding, he stumbled through the ruins, desperate to hide. Blood, smoke, monsters lurking everywhere. As he ducked into an alley, something wet and foul dripped onto his shoulder. Slowly, he turned his head. A monstrous centipede loomed over him, mandibles twitching eagerly. In a blind panic, he opened fire, emptying his magazine into the beast. But it wasn't enough. The centipede lunged. The soldier closed his eyes, bracing for death. But instead, there was a sickening rip. He opened his eyes and gasped. Standing over the bisected corpse of the centipede was Hunter Jinwoo, alive, radiant with a terrifying, otherworldly power. "Get out of here!" Jinwoo ordered, without looking back. Still dazed, the soldier stumbled away, and as he fled, he saw dozens, hundreds of monsters surging toward Jinwoo. But Jinwoo stood firm. A dark energy, ancient and violent, began to spiral around his right blade. With a single swing, the wave of monsters exploded into black mist. This was it. The war had begun. Shadow soldiers materialized around him like a black tsunami. From afar, the monarch watched the battlefield and snarled. So, the Lord of Shadows dares to appear on the Eastern Front. His generals grumbled, debating strategy. Some suggested concentrating all forces to crush Jinwoo now. Others urged patience, saying his army was pitifully small. The monarch narrowed his eyes. What was the Shadow Lord planning? At that moment, in a control room half a world away, The head of the association sat frozen before a wall of monitors. One report after another came in. Contact lost with all Hunter teams. American military mobilizing emergency forces for evacuation. Cities falling, mass casualties. The president watched in horror as footage showed monsters incinerating everything. Hunters, soldiers, civilians. America, once proud and mighty, was collapsing before his eyes. And now, humanity's last hope rested on one man. On the battlefield, the tide turned. Wherever Jinwoo fought, his army grew, swelling in numbers, overwhelming the monsters in a flood of black. Towers of shadow rose across the land. The very earth trembled under the weight of the war. From the skies, gigantic beasts loomed, some so massive they blotted out the sun, and in the center of it all, Hunter Jinwoo, the Shadow King. Standing alone, yes, against giants, and yet not alone, never alone. The giants, monstrous beasts, towering taller than skyscrapers, laid waste to entire neighborhoods with a single sweep of their massive limbs. But Jinwoo, swift as a shadow, was already there. With a flash of his black blade, he sliced through their legs, bringing the titans crashing to the ground. And as the monsters fell, his shadow soldiers swarmed over them like a living tide of darkness, tearing through their flesh and bone. Each slain beast became part of his army. His legion grew, but when Jinwoo raised his head again, he saw them. Dragons. Hundreds of them, darkening the sky, their scales glinting under the blood-red sun. The world trembled at the sight. There was no time to despair, no time to think. Jinwoo raised his hand, summoning the full might of his 100,000-strong shadow army. An ocean of black rose behind him, ready to meet the oncoming storm. The dragons roared and unleashed a torrent of hellfire, blanketing the skies and the earth in fire. Shadow soldiers were consumed instantly, their forms evaporating under the searing heat. One of the dragons floating high above laughed cruelly. "Pathetic! You think you can destroy the Dragon King?" he bellowed. But Jinwoo was already moving, riding atop his black dragon, hurtling toward the arrogant beast. "You talk too much," Jinwoo muttered coldly. He leapt from his dragon in a blink and drove his blade straight into the dragon's skull. With a roar of agony, the dragon spiraled down, crashing into the earth. Watching from afar, the Dragon King narrowed his golden eyes. The King of Darkness was growing stronger. Every second, every heartbeat. The Dragon King clenched his fists. It was time. He issued swift orders to the Lord of Transfiguration to remain behind and prepare the defenses. He, himself, would crush the King of Shadows. On the ground, ordinary soldiers, or brave men and women, continued to fight. They fired round after round, emptying their rifles, launching grenades, using anything they could to slow the monsters. They knew no hunters were coming to save them. They fought anyway. Suddenly, one of the largest beasts charged the line. But before it could reach them, Thomas Andre appeared, slamming his fist into the monster's jaw and sending it flying. "Man, it's been a while since I got to punch something like that." Thomas chuckled, cracking his knuckles. The Scavengers Guild, battered but not broken, rallied behind him. They wouldn't fall today, not without a fight. But then, something else emerged from the shadows. A voice, twisted and mocking, called out, "Ah, the steel body, the failed vessel of the Beast Lords." From between the monsters stepped a monstrous figure, the monarch of monstrous humanoids. "You," he sneered at Thomas Andre. "Your life will be mine in an instant. Still feel like fighting, little man?" Thomas didn't even flinch. He didn't care for threats. He only knew how to fight. But suddenly a massive shadow rose behind Thomas, a giant figure in black armor. It was Baran, the commander-in-chief of the Shadow Army. Baran stepped forward and faced the monarch. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" he said, his voice deep and steady. The humanoid monarch stared in disbelief. Where had all these shadow soldiers come from? Had they been hiding inside this ordinary human's shadow? Unthinkable. He tried to activate his communication link to the Dragon King, but nothing happened. The connection was dead. Panic flickered in his eyes. On a nearby rooftop, a shadow mage calmly stood, weaving magic into the air, cutting off all communications. They had thought the Shadow Lord would fight with brute force alone. But this strategy, it was human. It was brilliant. Furious, the humanoid monarch roared, "You worms! You're not worthy to be called lords." Baran only tilted his head calmly. "I suggest you take those words back," he said, "before you regret insulting my king." Infuriated, the monarch transformed, a massive, grotesque giant, muscles rippling, fists like meteors. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, Jinwoo had finally reached the Dragon King. The two greatest forces on Earth, King of Dragons versus King of Shadows, faced each other across a field of devastation. The Dragon King frowned. Why wasn't the Steel Body Lord answering him? Had he betrayed him? Or was this another trick of the Shadow Lord? Enough guessing. The Dragon King raised his hand and unleashed a torrent of flames. An inferno miles wide. Everything, buildings, streets, ruins, was consumed in a flash. Nothing could survive that. As the flames faded, a charred wasteland stretched before him. But then, whoosh, a shadow overhead. He looked up. Jinwoo stood on his dragon, untouched, surrounded by an aura of black fire. And in the next heartbeat, the Shadow Army rained down from the skies like falling stars, descending upon the Dragon King. The Dragon King raised his hand, gathering his own magic. But it was clear, the real battle had finally begun. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the battlefield, Hunter Jigon battled a monstrous giant. After a brutal fight, he managed to cut the beast down. Panting, he scanned the battlefield. The magical energy here was suffocating. The pain, the cries, the endless death. It was like the center of hell itself. He realized Jinwoo must have already engaged the Dragon King, and somewhere deep inside him, Jigon prayed that Jinwoo, their last light in this dark world, would emerge victorious, because if he fell, all would be lost. With a single wave of his massive hand, the Dragon King obliterated all the shadow soldiers Jinwoo had unleashed. To him it was effortless, and almost laughable. He sneered, believing that this was all Jinwoo had to offer. "Is that it?" the Dragon King scoffed. "You dare challenge me with such a pitiful force?" The Dragon King shook his head, convinced of his inevitable victory. But then he noticed something. Jinwoo was moving. The Shadow Lord seemed to retreat, running toward a portal that had opened behind him. "You think you can escape me?" The Dragon King roared and gave chase at full speed, determined not to let Jinwoo slip away. As they both crossed the threshold of the portal, the Dragon King expected to find Jinwoo fleeing like a coward. Instead, he found something else, a colossal army of shadow soldiers that standing silently, row after row, stretching beyond the horizon, waiting for them. The Dragon King's eyes widened. He realized too late, while they were toying with Jinwoo, the Shadow King had absorbed the armies of the defeated monarchs. Their betrayal, their defeat, had all been part of Jinwoo's trap. But the Dragon King, he had prepared as well. Atop a distant cliff, the Lord of Transfiguration had been waiting. Without hesitation, the Transfiguration Monarch opened a massive portal, summoning reinforcement after reinforcement to aid the Dragon King. The Dragon King smirked. "Fool!" he growled. "You thought you had me cornered? Look up." And when Jinwoo did, he saw the sky darken. Dozens of new portals bloomed like dark flowers, vomiting out dragons, monsters, and beasts from other dimensions. "You've already lost," the Dragon King hissed, voice filled with triumph. "Prepare to die." But then, Jinwoo smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. Without hesitation, Jinwoo raised his hand and began canceling the summons of his shadow army. The Dragon King froze, confused. Why would he dismiss his soldiers? Had he given up? Was he surrendering? It was suicide to face this storm alone. The Dragon King sneered. Cowardice, after all. Afraid? Giving up so easily? The Dragon King taunted. More and more dragons poured from the skies, ready to drown the Shadow Lord. The Dragon King, reveling in his victory, closed his eyes, preparing to watch Jinwoo burn to ash under the weight of his failure. But then, he felt it. A power. Pressure so heavy it crushed the very air around them. The Dragon King's eyes shot open. He knew this power, a skill, a forbidden one, tied to the legendary Reed Runestone, a skill that shattered hope, that induced despair in all who witnessed it, friend or foe, a skill that no dragon could resist, Dragon's Fear. In an instant, every dragon in the skies above every monarch on the battlefield, every creature born of magic and malice, fell to their knees. Their wings faltered, their hearts froze, an ocean of monsters paralyzed by pure, undiluted terror. The Dragon King stumbled, unable to comprehend. Why is it affecting me too? It was supposed to target only dragons. But Jinwoo, he wasn't just a user of Dragon's Fear anymore. He had become something else, something worse. The Dragon King staggered, and that's when Jinwoo struck. In the blink of an eye, Jinwoo appeared in front of him, seizing the Dragon King by the wrist. "You're coming with me," Jinwoo said coldly. And before the Dragon King could react, they vanished. When the world snapped back into focus, the Dragon King found himself somewhere else entirely, a deserted island, far from the battlefield, far from reinforcements. In the distance, a dark castle loomed. The Dragon King gritted his teeth. Where have you brought me?" "My domain," Jinwoo answered simply. "My castle." The Dragon King looked around in disbelief. He sneered. "Such a tiny, pathetic castle for a king of shadows," he mocked. But Jinwoo only smiled faintly. "It's big enough to celebrate your death." The Dragon King's grin faded. He understood then. This wasn't a castle. This wasn't a retreat. This was a graveyard. His graveyard. The Dragon King roared, his form twisting, expanding, growing larger and larger, until he blotted out the sky itself. A monstrous, apocalyptic dragon. Mountains trembled beneath his bulk. The castle, massive by human standards, looked like a toy at his feet. But Jinwoo didn't flinch. Already his shadow commanders were assembling around him. Baran, Igris, Tusk, Bellion, all gathering to their king's side. They were ready. Elsewhere, chaos ruled. America burned. The sky itself was aflame. The Hunters Association leaders stared helplessly at the devastation. They had trusted in their magic, their armies, their pride. None of it mattered. Even the strongest S-rank hunters, compared to these creatures, were ants before giants. Their deaths would be nothing but fleeting sparks against an endless night. One by one, their lives would flicker out. One soul, one body, one ray of light at a time. This was how hope was born. From despair, from sacrifice. Meanwhile, the Japanese Hunters Association received a report. Hunter Sung Jinwoo had captured the Dragon King, and the battle now raged on an uninhabited island near Japan, a place overflowing with magical energy. There, perhaps this final war could be contained. There, perhaps humanity would have a chance. But the president of the association knew they would not survive this war by ordinary means. No ranks would save them. No armies would protect them. Only the King of Shadows could stand between humanity and annihilation. In America, the president of the Hunters Association sat frozen at his desk, wondering aloud whether they should send reinforcements. Rank and file? National level? It won't make a difference anymore, he muttered. He looked up at his assistant, despair in his eyes. How could he have ever known that once, just once, even Hunter Jinwoo had been a lowly E rank? And now, that same young man was standing alone against the Dragon King himself. On the deserted island, the battlefield raged. Jinwoo's shadow army surged forward in waves, lashing out at the massive dragon that loomed before them. Supreme Commander Orn unleashed his devastating magic, slamming the Dragon King back to the ground. The giants under Jinwoo's command toppled onto the dragon's colossal frame, pinning him down with their immense weight. Igris soared high into the sky, lightning dancing along his blade as he plunged downward, cutting through the thick scales of the beast. Every strike, every movement, perfectly coordinated. It seemed for a brief and shining moment that they could win. Jinwoo stood atop the battlefield, watching. Everything was going according to plan. But then, the Dragon King laughed, a deep, resonating laughter that shook the earth itself. How amusing, he rumbled. Overwhelming an enemy with numbers? Was it not my favorite tactic? His voice turned cold. But did you truly believe it would work against me? In a flash, the Dragon King unleashed Dragon's terror, a brutal, all-consuming wave of dominance. Jinwoo's soldiers staggered, their bodies trembled. The unbreakable loyalty of the Shadow Army cracked for the first time. Jinwoo tried desperately to cancel the summons, but it was too late. The Dragon King opened his enormous jaws, and from his mouth a sphere of pure fire erupted. It roared forward like a second sun, devouring everything in its path. Jinwoo barely moved in time. The fiery explosion shattered the sea, splitting the ocean itself. Waves of boiling water surged up around the island as black smoke filled the skies. The Dragon King stood tall, breathing heavily, surveying the ruined battlefield. He spoke, almost gently. Blood, screams, madness, fear, all of it, the music of destruction. He stretched his arms wide. I am the Monarch of Destruction. I am your inevitable end. As the burning winds faded, Jinwoo emerged from the ruins, charred, battered, meaty but standing. The Dragon King smirked, impressed. You've run far enough, he said, reverting to his human form and descending slowly to the ground. He approached Jinwoo without hostility, almost as if talking to an old friend. You've been betrayed already, the Dragon King said calmly. By the rulers, by the shadows you once trusted. He offered his hand. Join me. I will spare your family. I will help you protect this world. Jinwoo stared at the offered hand. The temptation was real. Power, safety, peace. He could save them all? His mother, his sister, the countless people who had suffered. All it would take was a handshake, but then Jinwoo smiled. A tired, bitter smile. You're deluded, he said. You think I can't see it in your eyes? You don't want peace. You want to devour. The Dragon King's face hardened. Then, he said, voice low and menacing, you shall have no mercy. The ground trembled as the Dragon King transformed once again. His left arm swelled, massive, clawed, like the limb of an ancient beast, and he swung it with terrifying force toward Jinwoo. But Jinwoo was faster. He leapt into the air, dodging the blow, summoning Kaizul and his dark dragon beneath him. Together they soared higher, dodging streams of hellish fire that the Dragon King spat from below. Blades in hand, Jinwoo twisted midair, slashing at the Dragon King's thick neck. The strikes were clean, fast, but when he looked back he saw it. Not a scratch, not even a dent. The king and JInwoo flew a little farther from the battlefield, both sensing that the Dragon King was preparing another devastating dragon terror attack. At that moment, flames erupted from the castle, scorching the air with unbearable heat. Reacting instantly, Kaisel grabbed JInwoo by the tail and hurled him away from the blast. Only then did JInwoo realize what had happened. Kaisel had saved his life. By throwing him aside, Kaisel had taken the brunt of the Dragon King's fire himself, shielding JInwoo from certain death. As the torrent of flames died down, the surrounding sea began to boil from the heat. The Dragon King watched, expecting destruction, but quickly saw it was in vain. The dense clouds of dust rising from the island had obscured JInwoo's movements. Using the cover, JInwoo silently approached, closing in on the Dragon King with deadly intent. JInwoo tightened his grip on the Dragon King's massive neck, the rough texture of the scales under his fingers feeling like hardened stone, like the ancient bark of some monstrous tree. He slammed his fist down again and again, searching for even the slightest weak point, but it was no use. The Dragon King was too strong. The beast roared in fury, whipping his colossal paw towards JInwoo, trying to swat him away like a fly. But JInwoo was quicker. He leapt aside, narrowly dodging the deadly blow, and in that very moment, he summoned his shadow dragons. From the darkness, 3 dragons emerged, their wings blotting out the light as they surged toward the Dragon King. They sank their teeth into his thick neck, pulling and tearing. Flames erupted from the mouth of one of them, bathing the Dragon King in searing fire. JInwoo, riding atop Kaisel, circled above, watching carefully. But something gnawed at his mind. Even surrounded, even burning, the Dragon King stood unfazed. Neither flames nor teeth could pierce his defense. The Monarch of Destruction was something else entirely. JInwoo understood then. This wasn't enough. Not dragons, not numbers, not even the full might of his army. He needed something greater. A force capable of shattering mountains with a single strike. A power that went beyond mere summons. Something primal, something absolute. And then he remembered. The armor. The true Shadow Lord's armor. A manifestation of death and darkness itself. JInwoo closed his eyes. The air around him began to thicken. The very ground shook as dark energy, deeper and blacker than anything the world had ever seen, began to gather around him. The Dragon King paused, his instincts warning him of something terrifying. The air turned heavy. The skies dimmed. The light fled before the overwhelming darkness. "What? Are you?" the Dragon King growled. JInwoo didn't answer. Instead, the black energy clung to his body like living armor, growing, thickening, twisting. The immortal body of the true Shadow Monarch. The Dragon King stared in disbelief. It was impossible. The Shadow Monarch was once a fragment of light. How could a being born of light embody the abyss so completely? It defied logic. It defied reality itself. As the last tendrils of dark power sealed around JInwoo, he opened his eyes, and the world shuddered at the sight. An aura of death and destruction poured from him, boundless and absolute. This was no mere human. This was the King of Death, reborn. The Dragon King roared, flames gushing from his throat. A furious inferno that scorched the heavens themselves. But when the flames cleared, JInwoo still stood, untouched, unmoved. He raised his hand, and in a deafening crash, the two forces collided. Flame against shadow, destruction against death. The battlefield cracked and shattered beneath them as their powers tore the very world apart. The Dragon King swung his massive paw once again, but this time, JInwoo caught it, stopped it, and countered with a thunderous punch to the jaw. The Dragon King staggered back, dazed, but he was not defeated yet. With a snarl, the beast lunged forward, jaws snapping. He caught JInwoo midair, hurling him across the island like a broken doll. JInwoo slammed into the earth, motionless for a moment. Then his eyes snapped open. Above him, a tidal wave of flame, hotter than the core of a volcano, roared toward him. JInwoo rolled aside at the last possible instant, the edges of the blast grazing him. His armor cracked. Pieces fell away, but his spirit held. He rose to his feet, summoning a dark sword into his hand. The Dragon King descended from the sky, gathering fireballs in a swirling inferno around him. He hurled them down, devastating the island. Each explosion carved new craters into the burning earth. But JInwoo responded. From within the smoke and ash, spears of dark energy burst forth. One after another, they streaked toward the Dragon King, slicing through the air like deadly comets. One of them severed his wing. The Dragon King shrieked in fury, flames bursting from his mouth, clashing against the incoming shadows. The island quaked. The oceans roared. The skies cracked. It was a battle of gods. As the dust settled, JInwoo's armor, battered and broken, disintegrated. He fell from the sky, landing hard. His body screamed in exhaustion. Maintaining the true Shadow Monarch form drained even his near-limitless magic reserves. He barely had the strength to rise. The Dragon King approached, still in his human form now. A mocking smile played on his lips. "I'll give you one last chance," he said. "Join me. Become the true Shadow Monarch at my side. You and I, we could rule this world." Jinwoo, broken and bloodied, looked up at him and smiled. "No," he whispered. "I'm not interested in partnering with monsters." The Dragon King's smile vanished. "So be it," he growled. He drew a massive sword, larger than any man, from the void. Jinwoo summoned his own blade, its dark edge shimmering. The two monarchs faced each other, and the final duel began. Their blades clashed with earth-shattering force. Each strike sent shockwaves across the island. The Dragon King roared promises of death and destruction. "Your family, your friends, everything you ever loved. I'll burn it all to ashes," he bellowed. But Jinwoo's eyes burned brighter than ever. He was no longer just fighting for himself. He fought for everyone. And even if the heavens themselves fell, even if death awaited him at the end, he would never stop. The Dragon King smirked, certain that by now Jinwoo must have realized it, the true nature of Osborne's power, the endless cries of suffering, the despair that echoed across the world, the song of the army of destruction. This was war itself, summarized into an eternal scream. The Dragon King let the weight of it press down on Jinwoo, waiting for it to shatter his spirit. He believed that if Jinwoo could feel it, truly feel it, then regret would consume him, that he would collapse, that he would die, burdened by the guilt of the entire world. But Jinwoo only raised his head slowly, eyes burning. "That's strange," Jinwoo said with a cold, cutting smile, "because I was just about to tell you the same thing." The Dragon King's grin faltered. This battle, which had raged with such terrible power, was nearing its final moments. A dagger floated in the air, not forged from the dark scales of dragon fangs, and shot toward the Dragon King. The beast swatted it away effortlessly with his barrier, laughing. "Fool," he sneered. "Did you think a dagger like that could pierce me? Ridiculous." The flame born of darkness and the darkness born of light, they clashed again and again in this last bloody battle. And even as the Dragon King mocked him, Jinwoo stood silent behind him, blade ready, heart steady. The Dragon King roared and swung his giant sword, intending to slice off Jinwoo's head, to sever the final thread of resistance. But Jinwoo didn't flinch. As the first golden rays of dawn broke across the battlefield, the light of the sun itself rising behind him, he moved. The Dragon King screamed, promising to tear Jinwoo apart, to burn him alive and scatter his ashes to the wind. But Jinwoo's face was calm. No anger, no fear, only resolve. In one fluid motion, he summoned two blades to his hands. And at that moment, he was no longer just the Shadow Monarch. He was the little boy who had once fought to survive in a cruel and different world. He was the hunter who had risen from nothing. He was everything he had ever been. "You still don't realize it?" Jinwoo said quietly. "This is your end." And with those words, his father's blade, the blade filled with memories, sacrifices, and unspoken love, appeared in his hand. He struck. The Dragon King's armor cracked, and then shattered. One clean slash, and the Dragon King, Monarch of Destruction, was cut in half. As the Dragon King fell, his mind raced. He realized that Jinwoo had deceived him from the beginning, dragging him to a place far from allies, a barren land, isolated. He had unleashed the energy necessary to summon the ruler's army. He had turned what the Dragon King thought was a trap into his own execution ground. The Dragon King, bleeding and defeated, struggled to understand. "How?" he gasped. Jinwoo, stepping closer, answered calmly. "Simple," he said. "I learned it from the vessels, from the fragments of light the rulers left behind. Those very fragments had shown him the way, and given him the key to turn the tide." The Dragon King trembled, realizing just how deep Jinwoo's foresight ran. He thought back to the betrayal of the Demon King, the Ram, and the Beast Lord, how they had abandoned him. It wasn't some puppy that revealed this to Jinwoo. No, it was Osborne. And as Jinwoo raised his middle finger toward him in mock salute, the Dragon King roared in fury, lunging forward. But before he could reach Jinwoo, they came. The rulers, the brightest shards of light, descended from the heavens. Their divine spears pierced the Dragon King's broken body. There was no escape. The Monarch of Destruction, who had terrorized countless worlds, was undone at last. His last thoughts were of regret. Regret that even with all his power, he had underestimated this human. And Jinwoo, watching him dissolve into motes of black and red mist, whispered, "Don't worry, we'll meet again soon enough." As the last of the Dragon King's essence faded, one of the rulers approached Jinwoo, bowing his head. "You have ended our war," he said solemnly. "We do not know how to thank you." But Jinwoo's face remained serious. He had a request, a heavy, dangerous one. I have one favor to ask, Jinwoo said. The rulers, surprised, nodded. If it is within our power, we will grant it. Jinwoo's voice didn't waver. Use the cup of rebirth. One more time. The rulers exchanged uneasy glances. You wish to rewind time? One asked cautiously. Yes, Jinwoo confirmed. Even if the newly resurrected monarchs remember everything, even if the higher beings remain unchanged, I want to erase magic from this world. I want humanity to return to ordinary lives, free of this war. He would deal with the monarchs himself, alone, between the cracks of dimensions. The rulers hesitated. The cup of rebirth had been strained to its limits. If Jinwoo failed, there would be no second chance. He would be erased, not just from life, but from memory. No monuments, no legends, no one would even know he existed. Yet despite all that, Jinwoo smiled. He could already see it. His family, his mother, his sister, safe, at peace, watching TV together, living the ordinary, beautiful life they deserved. He was ready. He was willing to vanish from history itself, if it meant protecting them. Outside, humanity continued to fight against the monsters. The president of the Hunters Association sat in his office, deep in thought, while Jung In-ho stood beside him, his fists clenched tightly. He rose to his feet and said firmly, "This is exactly what I want. I have a place I must return to." The ruler standing before him looked at Jinwoo with a bittersweet smile. "So you wish to save the entire world, carrying this impossible burden alone," the ruler said softly. "You remind me of Osborne, the previous Shadow Monarch." After a long silence, the rulers, despite the risks, finally nodded. They would honor his wish. "We shall pray for your success," they said solemnly. But just as they prepared to begin, Jinwoo stopped them with one last question. "My shadow soldiers," he said. "What will happen to them in a world where they never existed?" The ruler looked at him, regret flashing in his eyes. "They will vanish with the flow of time," he said. Jinwoo closed his eyes for a moment, accepting the heavy truth without hesitation. "Then I'm ready," he said. At his words, the rulers lifted the cup of rebirth into the air. Golden light began to pour out of the goblet, flooding across the sky. Its radiance spread like a second sun, covering not only cities but entire continents and planets. Everyone, from the highest mountains to the deepest oceans, witnessed that brilliant light. Jinwoo's friends, his comrades in arms, his family watching from their living room window, even the chairman of the Hunters Association standing by his office window, all raised their heads toward the sky. Hunter Cha, still fighting somewhere on Earth, paused in the middle of the battlefield, gazing at the light with a heart full of unspoken wishes. All over the world, people stopped what they were doing and watched in awe and fear. And slowly, the whole planet began to rewind. Time turned backward, returning to a point before any of this horror had ever begun. In a small house, a young Gina ran to her brother's room, shouting joyfully. Jinwoo woke up groggily, blinking at the sunlight streaming through the windows. From the kitchen came the gentle clatter of a knife against a cutting board, and the warm, savory scent of breakfast filled the air. It was home. It was normal. His mother, healthy and smiling, hummed as she cooked. His sister sat cross-legged in front of the TV, absorbed in cartoons. Jinwoo's heart tightened painfully. Tears slipped silently down his cheeks. Was it just a dream? Was the nightmare finally over? The warm morning sun, the cheerful laughter. They dissolved the lingering darkness in his heart. He understood now. He had been given a second chance, a life where he could cherish his family and he protect them without bloodshed and despair. The future was finally, truly in his hands. Just for today, just for a little longer. He allowed himself to live, to breathe, to smile. Even if just for a little while, he wanted to savor this peace, to reward himself for the countless sacrifices he had made. That same day, as his mother tidied the apartment, she found a small note Jinwoo had left behind. "I'll be back after I finish one last mission." It was simple, but she smiled warmly at it. Meanwhile, far from Earth, Jinwoo stood in a silent, shadowy world, the battlefield between dimensions. In the stillness where only darkness reigned, he continued his lonely war against the remnants of the monarchs. Victory after victory, he cut through the armies of the demonic ghost monarch. One by one, he shattered their plans, even preventing them from creating another massive gate. Time passed differently in this empty space. While 2 years had barely gone by on Earth, Jinwoo had fought for 27 long years across dimensions. He wondered sometimes, how were Mom, Dad, and Gina doing now? Had Gina grown taller? Did Mom still worry about him? Did Dad still sit by the window, waiting for him to come home? Maybe. Maybe he should have explained everything before he left. But there had been no time to say goodbye. At last his soldiers approached him. One of the shadow commanders knelt down and said, "My king, we have won. All enemies have been defeated." But Jinwoo, standing tall under the endless black sky, replied with a soft smile, "No, not yet," because the final battle was still ahead. Far away, the Dragon King, seated atop his blackened throne, felt the tremors of his army's defeat. He realized then The Shadow Lord had turned back time, and their battle was inevitable. Soon, one of them would vanish into eternal oblivion. There would be no second chance. As he finished his dark musings, Jinwoo stepped through the dimensional rift, and there, like at the place where everything had begun, they met again. Meanwhile, back on Earth, 2 years after Jinwoo had disappeared, strange prophecies shook the world. Norma Selner, the woman who had once glimpsed Jinwoo's future, warned that a death-bearing deity would soon descend. A black hole appeared in the sky above the Power Investigation Headquarters, a sign that the time of judgment had arrived. Humanity waited, terrified for the end to come. At that same moment, in a quiet street, a boy holding flowers fidgeted nervously. He muttered to himself, "I didn't expect Hunter Jinwoo to arrive looking like a middle schooler. He scared the hell out of me." Behind him, Jinwoo, returned from a lifetime of battles, smiled quietly at the human world he had fought so desperately to save. He had returned, at last. And so it was nice that at least someone had come to meet him. Not that Jinwoo expected a grand welcome, but still, it warmed his heart. The man who greeted him spoke honestly. He admitted that he hadn't believed in the success of Jinwoo's mission, not until the very last moment. But now, looking at him standing there, alive after all the impossible battles, he realized something else. Jinwoo had nourished not just the earth, but tens of thousands of new hopes. Jinwoo smiled slightly and asked half-jokingly, "Are you sure you came all the way here just to give me a bouquet?" The man hesitated, then admitted, "Actually, the rulers wanted to convey something to you. But it's going to be a long conversation. Maybe we should find a more private place." Jinwoo's eyes gleamed with amusement. "I know just the place," he said. "There's an ice cream parlor nearby. I haven't had anything sweet in almost 27 years, and they definitely don't sell ice cream in the Desert of Shadows." They made their way to the ice cream shop, where children laughed and sunlight spilled warmly over checkered floors. A perfect place for a conversation about the fate of the world. While enjoying his long-missed ice cream, Jinwoo asked directly, "All right, enough dancing around. What do the rulers want from me?" The envoy smiled awkwardly, realizing that polite formalities would get him nowhere. "In truth, they are concerned," he admitted at last. "Your growing power could affect the laws of existence itself. This world, Earth, it's simply not ready to handle a being of your magnitude." Jinwoo's expression darkened. "So, what?" he said. "Now that I've destroyed all your enemies, you want me gone too? You're afraid of me?" The messenger flinched and hurriedly pulled out his phone. He extended it toward Jinwoo. "Please, read this," he said. On the screen was a message, a proclamation sent by the rulers. "The god of death shall not descend upon the earth." Selner's terrifying prophecy, the one that had spread fear across the globe, hadn't been about an enemy. It had been about him. The collision of worlds had changed Selner. She had glimpsed Jinwoo's return and mistaken his overwhelming power for humanity's doom. Jinwoo stared at the message for a long moment. "So you're saying it's my fault?" The envoy bowed his head in shame. "Yes, that is correct." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Jinwoo pushed his chair back and stood. "Enough. We can talk about blame later. Is your mission here complete?" The messenger nodded stiffly. "Yes, and if every living soul has a purpose, then your purpose, saving this world, has been fulfilled." He added quietly, "The very power that saved us is now the reason the world fears you." Jinwoo looked out the window. The sunlight outside was bright and pure. Children ran and laughed. Families reunited under the blue sky he had fought to protect. Was he no longer needed? Was it time to leave? Or was that merely a delusion? But then, as he watched an ordinary family share a simple lunch together, he felt his answer stirred deep inside him. Number. The real reason for his existence was here. Not in the endless wars, not in the battles between light and darkness, but in these ordinary people, these lives he cherished so deeply, even if they would never know how much he had sacrificed for them. That was why he had fought. That was why he had suffered. That was why he had won. Jinwoo smiled, and a small, genuine smile. He already knew what he would do. "I will stay, here, with them." He would protect this world forever, find the love he had once lost, and hold on to it until the very end. Because somewhere deep inside, he had 1,000 reasons, 1,000 memories, the Simon, that whispered, "Never leave again."